The afternoon sun blazed down on the Riverside Country Club pool deck as the handcuffs bit into Dr. Amelia Foster's wrists, her designer sundress soaking through as officers Kyle Brennan and Todd Mitchell laughed while pushing her backward into the deep end, unaware that 17 security cameras were recording every second and that in exactly 43 minutes, both their badges would be stripped away by the chief of police while the Attorney General of California watched via live stream from her office. The water rushed over Amelia's head as she sank, her hands bound behind her back, her body instinctively fighting for survival, while poolside members of the exclusive club sat frozen in their lounge chairs, their afternoon cocktails forgotten as they witnessed what would become the most consequential police misconduct case in California history. Amelia had arrived at the Riverside Country Club that morning as the invited keynote speaker for their annual charity gala. A renowned civil rights attorney who just won a landmark case against the LAPD for systematic discrimination. At 35, she'd already argued 3 cases before the Supreme Court, had been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the voices of justice, and was secretly wearing a wire as part of an ongoing FBI investigation into corruption within the Riverside Police Department. Though officers Brennan and Mitchell had no idea they'd just assaulted the very person gathering evidence to end their careers. If you've ever witnessed injustice and felt powerless to stop it, if you've ever seen authority abused and wished for immediate consequences, then you need to hear what happened next. Hit subscribe to Acts of Depth, where we share stories of justice arriving when least expected, but most deserved. The confrontation had started 20 minutes earlier when Amelia was sitting by the pool, reviewing her speech notes on her tablet, wearing the guest badge the club had provided. Officer Brennan, responding to what he would later claim was a suspicious person call that no one actually made, approached with his hand already on his weapon. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your membership card," he'd said, despite her visible guest badge, despite the fact that she was clearly working, despite the 3 white women sitting nearby without badges who weren't questioned. Amelia had responded calmly, showing her guest badge and explaining she was the keynote speaker. But Brennan's partner Mitchell had already decided the narrative. "Guest badges can be stolen," Mitchell said, his body camera conveniently malfunctioning, as it had during 12 other incidents involving Black citizens. "You match the description of someone who's been stealing from lockers. There was no such person, no reported thefts, no reason for the accusation except the color of Amelia's skin and their assumption that she didn't belong." The poolside members watched as Amelia pulled out her phone to call the club manager, but Brennan knocked it from her hand, the device skittering across the concrete and splashing into the pool. "Now you're destroying evidence," he declared, grabbing her wrist with enough force to leave bruises that would be photographed and submitted as evidence in federal court. "Turn around. You're under arrest for trespassing, theft, and resisting arrest." The charges were fabricated from nothing, built on air and prejudice. But in that moment, with 2 armed officers against 1 woman, the lies had power. "Officers, I'm Dr. Amelia Foster," she said clearly, knowing the FBI wire she wore in her designer watch was capturing every word. "I'm an attorney with the California Justice Institute. I'm here as an invited speaker. Please call the club manager, Richard Dalton. He'll confirm everything." But her credentials meant nothing to men who'd already decided she was guilty of existing while Black, in a space they designated as white only in their minds, if not in law. The handcuffs clicked shut with a finality that would have terrified anyone who didn't know what Amelia knew. That FBI agents were already mobilizing. That the California Attorney General, Catherine Murray, was watching a live feed from Amelia's wire. That every word the officers spoke was being transcribed in real time by a team of federal prosecutors who'd been building a case against the Riverside PD for 18 months. What happened next would become required viewing at every police academy in the nation, a moment when karma arrived dressed in chlorine and consequences. Officer Mitchell grabbed Amelia's shoulder, spinning her toward the pool's edge while Brennan laughed and said words that would be played in court and on every news channel in America. "Maybe a swim will cool off that attitude. You people always think you're above the law." The phrase "you people" would be dissected by legal analysts for months. But in that moment, it was just another weight added to the shoulders Amelia had been carrying since law school, when professors questioned whether she'd earned her spot or was just filling a quota. The push came suddenly, Mitchell's hands on her back while Brennan grabbed her bound arms, both officers shoving her backward into the pool with a force that would later be classified as attempted murder by the district attorney. Amelia hit the water hard, the chlorine stinging her eyes as she sank, her dress billowing around her like a dark cloud, her hands useless behind her back. She'd been a competitive swimmer in college, but with her hands cuffed, every instinct she'd developed was useless. Her lungs burned as she kicked desperately, trying to surface, while above her, the officers stood at the pool's edge watching. That's when Margaret Chen, a 60-year-old cardiac surgeon who'd been reading nearby, dove into the pool fully clothed, her medical instincts overriding any fear of the officers. She reached Amelia just as she was starting to lose consciousness, pulling her to the surface with the strength that came from years of standing for 12-hour surgeries. "She's drowning!" Dr. Chen screamed at the officers. "She's handcuffed. This is attempted murder." But Brennan just smiled and said, "She's resisting rescue now." "Add that to the charges." Three other pool members jumped in to help. Thomas Richardson, a retired Marine, Jennifer Park, a swimming instructor, and surprisingly Bradley Whitman, a Republican judge who'd never thought he'd find himself saving a black woman from police officers, but who recognized injustice when it was drowning in front of him. Together, they pulled Amelia to the shallow end while she coughed up water, her body shaking not from cold, but from the proximity of death she'd just experienced. "Everyone back away from the suspect," Mitchell ordered, his hand moving to his weapon. But Judge Whitman stood up in the pool, water dripping from his polo shirt, and spoke with the authority of 30 years on the bench. "Officers, I'm Judge Bradley Whitman of the Superior Court. You've just committed assault with intent to kill. If you draw that weapon, I'll personally ensure you're charged with attempted mass murder." The standoff lasted 10 seconds that felt like 10 years, dozens of phone cameras recording every moment. That's when Amelia, still coughing up chlorinated water, managed to speak the words that changed everything. "My watch," she gasped, looking at Dr. Chen. "Press the side button 3 times." Dr. Chen fumbled with the designer watch, pressing the hidden panic button that sent an emergency signal to the FBI field office. Within seconds, Amelia's phone, now retrieved from the pool by a teenage lifeguard, began ringing with a call from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The teenager, a 17-year-old named Marcus Williams, who'd been recording everything on his phone, answered the call on speaker. "This is Special Agent Rivera with the FBI. We have Dr. Foster's location and are monitoring the situation. Officers Brennan and Mitchell, you are being recorded as part of a federal investigation. Do not move. Do not touch your weapons. Federal agents are 3 minutes out." The color drained from both officers' faces as the reality of their situation crashed over them like the water they'd pushed Amelia into. "This is a setup," Brennan said, his voice cracking. "She entrapped us." But Judge Whitman laughed bitterly. "Entrapment? She was sitting here reading. You approached her. You handcuffed her. You pushed her into a pool where she nearly drowned. The only thing she did was exist while black in your presence." He turned to the crowd, many of whom were his colleagues and friends. "Every one of you is a witness. I expect to see you all in court." The sound of helicopters suddenly filled the air, not news choppers, but FBI tactical units, their black silhouettes cutting across the cloudless California sky like mechanical birds of prey. 3 black SUVs screeched into the country club's parking lot, and within seconds, the pool area was surrounded by federal agents in tactical gear, their weapons drawn but pointed downward, their movements precise and coordinated. Special Agent in Charge Maria Rivera emerged from the lead vehicle, her badge gleaming in the afternoon sun, her expression carrying the controlled fury of someone who just watched a colleague nearly murdered. "Officers Brennan and Mitchell, you're under federal arrest," Rivera announced, her voice carrying across the now silent pool deck. "The charges include attempted murder, violation of civil rights under color of law, assault on a federal witness, and obstruction of justice." She looked at Amelia, still sitting at the pool's edge, Dr. Chen checking her vitals. "We have everything, counselor." "Every word, every action. The wire survived the water." Brennan tried to run, a desperate sprint toward the parking lot, But he'd forgotten about Marcus Williams, the teenage lifeguard who'd grown up playing football. Marcus tackled him with perfect form, bringing the officer down on the grass while the crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Mitchell dropped to his knees, his hands behind his head, finally understanding that his badge couldn't protect him from the consequences of trying to drown an innocent woman. As federal agents cuffed both officers with their own handcuffs, a detail that wouldn't be lost on anyone, Amelia stood up slowly, water still dripping from her ruined dress, and pulled out a waterproof document holder from her bag. "Officers Brennan and Mitchell," she said, her voice steady despite nearly drowning minutes earlier, "I'm serving you with federal lawsuits on behalf of 17 victims of your previous assaults. Yes, we know about them all. Every black family you have terrorized, every false arrest, every malfunction of your body cameras." The country club members, many of whom had supported tough-on-crime policies, stood in shocked silence as Amelia continued. "For the past 18 months, I've been working with the FBI to expose systematic racism in the Riverside Police Department. You two have been our primary targets because of your extensive history of violence against black citizens. But we needed you to do something so egregious, so undeniable, that even your supporters couldn't excuse it." She gestured to the pool. "Attempting to drown a handcuffed woman in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses? That should do it." Richard Dalton, the club manager, finally arrived, his face ashen as he took in the scene. Federal agents, local officers under arrest, his keynote speaker soaking wet. "Dr. Foster, I'm so sorry. When you didn't answer your phone, I came looking." He stopped, seeing the bruises on her wrists, understanding flooding his features. "They did this to you? Here? At our club?" The liability implications were staggering. But more than that, Dalton seemed genuinely horrified that such violence had occurred at his facility. That's when California Attorney General Catherine Murray appeared on Marcus Williams's phone, which Agent Rivera had connected to a video call. "Dr. Foster, are you all right?" Murray asked, her concern genuine despite being 200 miles away in Sacramento. "We saw everything. The governor and I are prepared to take immediate action." She addressed the crowd directly through the small screen that Marcus held up. "Let me be clear to everyone present. What you witnessed today is not an isolated incident. It's systematic, and it ends now." Amelia took the phone, looking directly at the camera, knowing this was being recorded and would be broadcast nationwide. "Attorney General Murray, I want to thank Officers Brennan and Mitchell." Everyone gasped at her words. "They've just provided us with the evidence we needed to dismantle a corrupt system. Their attempt to kill me will result in federal oversight of the entire Riverside Police Department. Their racism will lead to the termination of 37 officers we've identified as problems. Their violence will spark the reform that peaceful protest couldn't achieve." The pool deck had transformed into a crime scene, with FBI evidence technicians photographing every angle, measuring distances, collecting water samples that would prove Amelia had ingested chlorinated water during her near drowning. Dr. Chen insisted on staying with Amelia, monitoring her breathing, checking for signs of secondary drowning that could occur hours after a water rescue. The afternoon sun was beginning to slant westward, casting long shadows across a scene that would be remembered as a turning point in American policing. Judge Whitman, still dripping pool water, approached Amelia with something in his eyes she'd never expected to see: tears. "Counselor Foster, I need to apologize," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've sat on the bench for 30 years. I've seen countless cases of police misconduct come through my courtroom, and I always gave officers the benefit of the doubt. I believed they were good people making split-second decisions under pressure." He paused, his voice cracking. "But what I saw today wasn't a split-second decision. It was attempted murder committed with casual cruelty. How many times have I been wrong? How many victims did I fail to believe?" His confession sparked something in the crowd. Margaret Thornton, a prominent Republican donor, stepped forward. "I've donated millions to back the blue campaigns. I've argued at dinner parties that police brutality was exaggerated by the media. I was wrong. I watched them try to kill you for no reason except hatred." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my accountant. Every dollar I was planning to donate to police organizations is going to civil rights groups instead." Officer Brennan, now in FBI custody, made one last attempt to control the narrative. She was reaching for something. I feared for my life. But 17-year-old Marcus Williams held up his phone, showing the unedited video from start to finish. She was reading on her tablet when you approached. She never reached for anything. You created danger where none existed, then tried to kill her for it. The teenager's words carried the weight of truth that no legal argument could dispel. That's when Amelia revealed something that made even Agent Rivera's eyes widen. There's something else you should all know. I'm not just a civil rights attorney. I'm also a federal prosecutor, appointed last month to lead a joint task force on police corruption. Officers Brennan and Mitchell weren't just recorded on my wire. They were being watched by satellite surveillance as part of a Homeland Security investigation into connections between white supremacist groups and local law enforcement. She pulled out her federal credentials, water-damaged but still readable. We have evidence that both officers are members of the Patriot Guard, a white nationalist organization that's infiltrated police departments across California. Their phones, computers, and homes are being searched as we speak. What started as a civil rights investigation has become a national security issue. Mitchell finally spoke from his knees, his voice desperate. I want a deal. I'll testify, I'll give you names, dates, everything. But Brennan turned on him with rage. Shut up, you coward. They can't prove anything. The partnership that had terrorized black citizens for 5 years crumbled in seconds, each officer now looking to save himself at the expense of the other. Amelia stood, water still dripping from her dress but her dignity intact. Gentlemen, you should know that pushing me into that pool activated not just my emergency beacon, but also triggered a dead man's switch I'd programmed. If I didn't enter a code within 5 minutes, every piece of evidence I've collected, videos, documents, recordings, would be automatically released to the Washington Post, CNN, and the ACLU. You didn't just try to drown me, you triggered your own exposure on a national scale. By sunset, the Riverside Country Club had become the center of a media storm that would reshape American policing. News helicopters circled overhead, while reporters lined the club's entrance, their cameras capturing the surreal image of 2 police officers being led away in FBI custody, while the woman they tried to drown stood tall, giving testimony to federal agents. But the most powerful moment came when Amelia's mother, retired Circuit Judge Eleanor Foster, arrived at the scene. Judge Foster, 70 years old and walking with the dignity of someone who'd spent 40 years fighting for justice, embraced her daughter while cameras rolled. My baby girl, she whispered, but her whisper was caught by the microphones. You did what I could never do. You didn't just survive them, you defeated them. She turned to the cameras, her voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. My daughter nearly died today for the crime of being black at a swimming pool, but her sacrifice will save countless others from similar fates. The Riverside Police Chief, Patricia Hayward, arrived with her entire command staff, her face grim as she surveyed the damage to her department's reputation. Dr. Foster, she said formally, on behalf of the Riverside Police Department, I offer our deepest apologies. But Amelia interrupted her. Chief Hayward, I don't want apologies. I want resignations. Our investigation shows you were aware of Brennan and Mitchell's behavior patterns. You received complaints, you ignored them. You're either complicit or incompetent, and either way, you're finished. Chief Hayward's resignation came 20 minutes later, delivered to the mayor via text message while she still stood at the crime scene. The mayor himself, Thomas Chen, Dr. Margaret Chen's son, announced immediate reforms: federal oversight of the police department, mandatory bias testing for all officers, and the creation of a civilian review board with actual power to fire problematic officers. What happened to Dr. Foster today has shamed our city, he said. But from this shame, we will build something better. As night fell and the pool area was finally cleared, Amelia sat with the people who'd saved her life. Dr. Margaret Chen, Judge Bradley Whitman, Thomas Richardson, Jennifer Park, and Marcus Williams, strangers brought together by a moment of crisis who'd chosen to act rather than watch. You all risked yourselves to save me, Amelia said. The officers could have turned on you. Sometimes, Judge Whitman said slowly, you see something so wrong that staying silent makes you complicit. I've been complicit for too long, dismissing cases, believing lies, choosing order over justice. Today I chose differently, he looked at Marcus Williams. This young man showed more courage than I've shown in 30 years on the bench. He's 17 and he tackled an armed officer to protect justice. What's my excuse for all the times I didn't? Marcus Williams, still processing that he'd become a viral hero, spoke with the wisdom that sometimes comes to the young who see clearly. My grandmother always told me that swimming pools have a history in America. They were segregated, then when they were integrated, they were filled with concrete rather than let black kids swim in them. Today they tried to use a pool as a weapon again, but this time people jumped in to help. That's progress, right? 6 months later, officers Brennan and Mitchell were convicted on federal charges and sentenced to 15 and 12 years respectively. The investigation they triggered led to the arrest of 43 officers across California connected to white supremacist organizations. The Riverside reforms became a model for police accountability nationwide, requiring all officers to wear cameras that couldn't be turned off, establishing civilian oversight with real power, and mandating that any officer who witnessed misconduct and didn't report it faced the same charges as the perpetrator. Amelia returned to the Riverside Country Club exactly 1 year later, this time to deliver the keynote speech she'd never given. The pool where she'd nearly died had been renamed the Justice Pool, and a plaque was installed reading, "On this spot, Dr. Amelia Foster survived." An attempted murder that exposed systematic racism and sparked nationwide police reform. May this water that was used as a weapon become a symbol of transparency, clarity, and justice flowing freely. In her speech, Amelia said something that would be quoted in history books. They pushed me into this pool thinking water would silence me. They didn't understand that water has memory. It remembers every injustice, every violence, every person who chose to look away. But it also remembers every hand that reached out to help, every voice that spoke truth, every person who chose justice over comfort. Today, we choose to remember both, the violence that brought us here and the courage that will carry us forward. Marcus Williams, the teenage lifeguard who tackled Officer Brennan, received a full scholarship to Stanford, where he would study law, inspired by Dr. Foster to become a civil rights attorney. Judge Whitman retired early and began teaching at law schools about judicial bias and the courage to admit when you have been wrong. Dr. Margaret Chen established a foundation training bystanders in intervention techniques. The country club, once a symbol of exclusion, became a center for community dialogue about race and justice. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can make extraordinary choices when confronted with injustice, share it with someone who needs to see that standing up matters, that intervention saves lives, that justice sometimes comes from unexpected places. Subscribe to Acts of Depth for more stories of courage in crisis and the power of choosing to act rather than watch. Remember that every time we witness injustice, we make a choice to be the person who watches someone drown or the one who jumps in to help. The pool of justice is deep, but together we can ensure no one drowns in it alone.